Assalamu alaikum dear students. Welcome to the course Principle in Animal Life 1. This is lecture number 36. The topic is acids, bases and buffers. Discussing agenda for the topic will be acidic and basic conditions affect living organisms. Then we will discuss acids and bases. And finally, buffers. Lecture outcome. After watching and listening this lecture, students will know about acids, bases, and buffer system in blood. Introduction. Acidic and basic conditions affect living organisms. Occasionally, a hydrogen atom participating in a hydrogen bond between two water molecules shifts from one molecule to another molecule. Two water molecules are bonded with one another, and occasionally one of the hydrogen bonds shifts from one water molecule to another molecule, and the result is hydrogen atom leaves its electrons behind. Means the electrons are there with the water molecule from where the hydrogen atom departed, and what is actually transferred is a hydrogen ion, because hydrogen has only a single electron, so it leaves its single electron with the water molecule from where it is departing, and what actually departs is a proton or a hydrogen ion having a charge of 1 plus. The water molecule that lost a proton is known as a hydroxide ion, which has a charge of 1 minus. The proton binds to the other water molecule, making that molecule a hydronium ion. And this reaction can be pictured as, you can see here, two water molecules are bonded with one another courtesy of hydrogen bond, and then one of the hydrogen bonds it shifts from this water molecule to this one. So what will be the result? The result will be a hydronium ion and a hydroxide ion. The hydroxide ion is carrying a negative charge because it also has the electron of the departed hydrogen atom. And remember, this is a reversible reaction, means this reaction can go backward into its original form and vice versa. By convention, H, the hydrogen ion, is used to represent hydronium ion. Keep in mind though that H does not exist on its own in an aqueous solution, means this type of an ion is not there in aqueous solution. It must be in interaction with some other molecule. It is always associated with a water molecule in the form of hydronium ion. As indicated by the double arrows, what we saw in the previous slide, this is a reversible reaction that reaches a state of dynamic equilibrium, means when the rate of the forward reaction and the backward reaction is same, then we say that a dynamic equilibrium has been established. At this equilibrium point, the concentration of water molecules greatly exceeds the concentration of hydrogen ion and hydroxyl ion, because this splitting of water molecules, although it occurs, but it is extremely rare. In pure water, only one water molecule in every 554 million is dissociated. So it gives you an idea about how rare that splitting of the water molecule is. Only one water molecule manages to split out of 554 million. The concentration of hydrogen and hydroxyl ions in pure water is therefore 10 raised to the power minus 7 moles. So it means that pure water, the concentration of hydrogen and hydroxyl ion is equal. Therefore, pure water has a neutral pH at 25 degrees centigrade. Remember, you will study in different books the phrase room temperature. So 25 degrees centigrade is usually referred to as room temperature. This means there is only 1/10,000,000th of a mole of hydrogen ions per liter of pure water and an equal number of hydroxide ions. So because the splitting of the water molecule is such a rare process that the presence of the free hydrogen and hydroxyl ions in water, in pure water, is extremely small. Even so, this is a huge number, over 60,000 trillions of each ion in a liter of pure water. Now, because there are millions and billions of water ions, so even if we calculate from this figure 1 out of 554 million, then it still makes a huge number. Although the dissociation of water is reversible and statistically rare, it is exceedingly important in the chemistry of life. Hydrogen and hydroxyl ions are very reactive. Change in their concentrations can drastically affect a cell's protein and other complex molecules, because inside the cell the pH must maintain at an optimum level, and only then the enzymes and other molecules will function at their best. If there is a deterioration in the pH, then it will drastically affect the enzymatic activity and the functioning of other molecules. As we have seen, the concentration of hydrogen and hydroxyl ions are equal in pure water. It means when their concentration is equal, it signifies the fact that the pH of water is 7 or neutral when they are in equal number. But adding certain kinds of solutes called acids and bases disrupts this balance. So when an acid is added, acid will either increase the concentration of hydrogen ions or decrease the concentration of hydroxyl ions. Similarly, if base is added, base will either increase the concentration of hydroxyl ions or decrease the concentration of hydrogen ions. Biologists use something called the pH power of hydrogen scale to describe how acidic or basic a solution is. So the pH is a scale which denotes the acidity or basicity of a solution. Now we formally discuss acids and bases. What would cause an aqueous solution to have an imbalance in hydrogen and hydroxyl ions concentration? We already discussed that in pure water the pH is neutral, which means the concentration of hydrogen and hydroxyl ion is equal. So what conditions can cause a deterioration, an imbalance in the concentration of these two ions in pure water? Obviously it will not be pure when an acid or a base is added, because these two chemicals will induce their own effects. When acids dissolve in water, they donate additional hydrogen ions to the solution. As we said on the last slide, that acid is a substance which either increases the hydrogen ion concentration or decreases the hydroxyl ion concentration. So if the hydroxyl ion concentrations are decreased, it will automatically be a sign of the increase of hydrogen ions. Suppose there are 200 hydrogen ions and 200 hydroxyl ions. So when an acid is added, either the number of hydrogen ions will jump to 300 or the number of hydroxyl ions will decrease to 100. So automatically their number increases, either directly or indirectly. So an acid is a substance that increases the hydrogen ion concentration of a solution. How we do it? Either by increasing this concentration directly or by decreasing the concentration of hydroxyl ions. For example, when hydrochloric acid is added to water, hydrogen ions dissociate from chloride ions. So when HCl is added to water, to pure water, there is a dissociation of this molecule, and the hydrogen and chloride ions are separated. So the hydrogen ions contributed by HCl adds to the concentration of the hydrogen ions already present in the solution. You can see here by this chemical reaction, hydrogen ions, hydrochloric acid added to water dissociates into hydrogen and chloride. This source of hydrogen ion dissociation of water is the other source, results in an acidic solution, dissociation of water, which we already discussed in the beginning. When the two water molecules bonded with each other, quite often one hydrogen ion leaves one water molecule, it becomes part of the other molecule. So it also adds hydrogen ions and this process also adds, when acid is added, it automatically increases the hydrogen ion concentration of a solution, results in an acidic solution. Acidic solution is one having more hydrogen ions than hydroxyl ions. Remember, acidic solution is one which has more hydrogen ions than hydroxyl ions. Now here you can introduce another concept, which is strong acids and weak acids. So a strong acid is one which is dissociated completely into its individual ions, and a weak acid is one which is dissociated partially. A substance that reduces the hydrogen ion concentration of a solution is called a base. Some bases reduce the hydrogen ion concentration directly by accepting hydrogen ions. For example, ammonia. Ammonia acts as a base when the unshared electron pair in nitrogen's outermost shell attracts a hydrogen ion from the solution, resulting in an ammonium ion. You can see here when ammonia is introduced into an aqueous solution, ammonia establishes association with the hydrogen ions, thereby decreasing the number of hydrogen ions and forming ammonium ion. And once again, this reaction is reversible reaction, means the reaction can move both in forward and backward direction. When you see this symbol with both arrows, it means a reversible reaction, and it also means that the base is a weak base, either if it is present in the reaction of an acid or a base. This double arrow means that this reaction can move in forward and backward direction, so it usually means that the acid or the base is a weak base. Other bases reduces the hydrogen ion concentration indirectly by dissociating to form hydroxide ions, which combine with hydrogen ions and form water. For example, sodium hydroxide, which is a strong base. Sodium hydroxide in water dissociate into its ions, sodium and hydroxide. So now we have examples for the definitions of the base. A base is a substance which decreases the concentration of hydrogen ions, or a base is a substance which increases the concentration of hydroxyl ions. In either case, the base reduces the hydrogen ion concentration. Solutions with a higher concentration of hydrogen than hydroxyl than hydrogen ions are known as basic solutions. Remember that pure water has a pH of 7 because the concentration of hydrogen and hydroxyl ions are equal. So when an acid or a base is added, then this concentration does not remain equal and it shifts in either direction depending upon what you have added. Either a base which will increase concentration of hydrogen ions, or an acid which will increase concentration of hydroxyl ions directly or indirectly. A solution in which the hydrogen and hydroxyl concentrations are equal is said to be neutral with a pH of 7. Notice that single arrows were used in the reaction for HCl and NaOH. If you recall the previous slides, the reactions showing the dissociation of HCl and sodium hydroxide were single arrow, which means that both of them are strong acid and base. A strong acid is one which is dissociated completely. A weak acid is one which is dissociated partially, similar for the bases. A strong base is one which is dissociated completely. A weak is one which is dissociated partially. These compounds dissociate completely when mixed with water. So hydrochloric acid is called a strong acid and sodium hydroxide a strong base. In contrast, ammonia is a weak base because ammonia is dissociated partially, and moreover there is a reaction which can move either in forward direction to form ammonium ion or in backward direction to form ammonia and free hydrogen ion. So the double arrow shows that this particular acid or base is weak and dissociated partially. The double arrows in the reaction for ammonia indicate that the binding and release of hydrogen ions are reversible reactions. The equilibrium can shift in either direction. Although at equilibrium there will be a fixed ratio of ammonium ion to ammonia when a dynamic equilibrium is established. Dynamic equilibrium means when the rate of forward and backward reaction is same, then the concentration of the ammonium ion and ammonia will be same or in a fixed ratio. Weak acids are acids that reversibly release and accept back hydrogen ions. An example is carbonic acid. Carbonic acid is dissociated into bicarbonate ion and hydrogen. So this reaction can also move back in the backward direction and reform carbonic acid. So this double arrow once again means that it is a weak acid and the reaction can move in either direction. Here the equilibrium so favors the reaction in the left direction, that when carbonic acid is added to pure water, only 1% of the molecules are dissociated at any particular time. So there is partial dissociation of carbonic acid. Only 1% is dissociated. Therefore, we term it as weak acid. Still, that is enough to shift the balance of hydrogen and hydroxide ions from neutrality. Although it is a weak acid, but it still has certain effects on the concentration of hydrogen ions. After all, it is an acid. Now we move on to buffers. Here we will discuss the importance of this acid and base discussion to the living organisms or to the cell, how acidity and basicity affects the pH of a cell, and whether the cell or the organism has any mechanism to eliminate the effect of those acids and bases. The internal pH of most living cells is close to 7, close to neutral. Even a slight change in pH can be harmful because the chemical processes of the cell are very sensitive to the concentration of hydrogen and hydroxide ions. So a cell cannot afford to have a pH either below or above this particular level, because most of the processes going on inside the cell are at their optimum levels at this pH. The pH of human blood is very close to 7.4, which is slightly basic. If the value is increasing beyond 7, then the solution becomes basic. If it is decreasing below 7, then the solution becomes acidic. A person can't survive for more than a few minutes if the blood pH drops to 7 or rises to 7.8, and a chemical system exists in the blood that maintains a stable pH. So there is a very narrow range. If deterioration occurs beyond this range, then the cell or the organism is unable to survive because the important life processes going on inside are stopped or hampered considerably. Now, is there any system in the blood which helps to maintain a proper pH? Now, how much the addition of an acid can deteriorate the pH? Here is an example. If 0.01 mole of a strong acid is added to a liter of pure water, the pH drops from 7 to 2. Such a huge difference. A minute concentration of strong acid in a 1 liter of water is still enough to bring about a drastic change in the pH. If the same amount of acid is added to a liter of blood, however, the pH decreases is only from 7.4 to 7.3. Imagine there is a strong system, a highly efficient system in blood which maintains the pH of blood irrespective of any changes, any addition of acid or base. The pH of the blood still maintains at a proper level because it is vital to the life of the organism. Now, which system ensures the pH in that range? There must be something which enables this mechanism, which enables the pH to stay in the range. Why does the addition of acid have so much less of an effect on the pH of blood than it does on the pH of water? You can see here it has brought a considerable change when 1 molar solution of strong acid was added to pure water. But when the same acid having same concentration is added to blood, it has a very small change. So what is there in the blood which resist changes in the pH? The presence of substance called buffers allow biological fluids to maintain a relatively constant pH despite the addition of acids or bases. So there is a strong buffer system present in the biological fluids which enables the pH to stay at a proper level, a level which is feasible for the chemical reactions going on inside. What is that system? What kind of the buffer system is there and how it operates? Now we define buffer as a substance that minimizes changes in the concentration of hydrogen and hydroxyl ions in a solution. This buffer term is, I hope, not new for you as far as this course is concerned, because in the topic of the plasma membrane we studied cholesterol, which acts as a fluidity buffer and maintains the fluidity of the plasma membrane at a proper level. So here is a more relevant explanation of the buffer system, as buffer is a substance which minimizes changes in the concentration of hydrogen and hydroxyl ions in other words, which maintains the pH of a solution at a proper level. Here you can see this is an efficient buffer system which is present in the blood, and this buffer system is called carbonic acid bicarbonate buffer system. Now, how this buffer system operates? It does so by accepting hydrogen ions from the solution when they are in excess and donating hydrogen ions to the solution when they have been depleted. So when hydrogen ions are in excess, hydrogen ions will be in excess only when an acid is added, because acid increases the concentration of hydrogen ions. So what will happen if an acid is added? If an acid is added, this reaction will move in the backward direction, and the molecules of hydrogen which are in excess because of the addition of acid, they will form association with the carbonate ions, and carbonic acid will be formed. This equilibrium will shift in the backward direction upon the addition of an acid, or if the concentration of hydrogen ions increases. Most buffer solutions contain a weak acid and its corresponding base, which combine reversibly with hydrogen ions. Several buffers contribute to pH stability in human blood and many other biological solutions. One of these is carbonic acid, which is formed when carbon dioxide reacts with water in blood plasma. Carbon dioxide is already present in blood because of the cellular respiration where it is produced, and water is either consumed or it is produced inside the body. We will study the cellular respiration, in which at the very end water molecules are produced. So water which is produced inside the body as a result of chemical reactions is called metabolic water. So the water can either come from consuming directly by the organism or produced inside courtesy of chemical reactions. So these carbon dioxide and water, they mix together and they form carbonic acid, which is a weak acid. As mentioned earlier, carbonic acid dissociates to yield a bicarbonate ion and a hydrogen ion. The chemical equilibrium between carbonic acid and bicarbonate act as a pH regulator. The reaction shifting left or right as other processes in the solution add or remove hydrogen ions. If the hydrogen ion concentration in blood begins to fall, when it will begin to fall? It will begin to fall when the base is added. So what will happen? The reaction proceeds to the right and more carbonic acid dissociates, replenishing hydrogen ions. But when the hydrogen ion concentration in blood begins to rise, the reaction proceeds to the left with carbonic acid removing the hydrogen ions from the solution and forming bicarbonate ions. We will refer to this chemical reaction for explanation. Now, suppose an acid is added to the blood. Now, what acid do? Acid increase the concentration of hydrogen ions. So when acid is added, these extra hydrogen ions will form bond with the carbonate ion, and the reaction will move in the backward direction, and the effect of the extra hydrogen ions will be neutralized. When a base is added, then what will happen? This reaction will move in forward direction, and more hydrogen ions will be produced, which will bind with the hydroxyl ions contributed by the acid, and water will be produced. So in either case there will be no harmful effect, no drastic change in the pH. I am repeating once again, if an acid is added, acid increases the concentration of hydrogen ions. So what will happen in that case? The reaction will move in the backward direction, and carbonic acid will be produced. If a base is added, then base increases the concentration of hydroxyl ions. So what will happen to these extra hydroxyl ions? This reaction will move in the forward direction. The equilibrium will be shifted in the forward direction, and dissociation will occur, and these hydrogen ions produced as a result of rapid dissociation will bind with the hydroxyl ions and form water. So in both cases the effect of the acid and bases will be diminished. Addition of an acid shifts equilibrium in backward direction. Addition of base shifts equilibrium in forward direction. This was the end of the lecture. Thank you very much for having me. Allah Hafiz.